Images, and we're continuing our series on Cult TV. Um, I've got Bill Mulligan, got Keith Howell, panel moderator, and CF Roberts. And
Hello.
I'm Henry Covert, and we are going to cover more cult television shows. And when this is series all done, we're going to collect into a massive. It will be our biggest playlist, but I think it will. So far, it's doing good. The episodes we have posted, but we've got a lot more coming. So I wanted to make a couple announcements real quick before we jump into the first show we're going to talk about. So we've got some cool things happening on Sunday. We're starting these occasional Sunday sessions. I couldn't get everybody together in time to do the first one and just do it. So the person that was going to be our special guest is really going to be just kind of like you guys. Her name's Kirsty McQueen. I don't know if I've talked to everyone about her, but let me go ahead and plug her. And she has a YouTube channel called Homicide Highway, which is true crime. And then she has a podcast on Spotify called Too Extreme for Mainstream. So she really enjoyed our two most disturbing series, and I told her we probably wouldn't be doing one indefinitely. But maybe we could just take a movie or two and just do a symposium like we did with X-Men 97, so people can watch it or not watch it. And so me and her in 2 days are going to do a Serbian film. This should be interesting. I don't know. It should be interesting. If she's really good, she may become a recurring, panelist. And then next Friday, we've got Black Cinema, the third session. So we're going to try to get in some of the ones we missed before, didn't have time for. And then on the 12th of July, we have our second big interview, which is Yvette Izan. She's a Filipino actress and film producer who has worked a lot in Italy and with Italian directors and actors, primarily with Italian horror in the early 2000s with Bruno Mattei. And she was in some zombie films, and she was a gorgeous zombie killer. So she's going to talk to us about that and just her career, just get people acquainted with her. And I'm happy to publicize her. She's a really cool woman. So first up, we have the amazing Bill Mulligan. And I'm not sure what you're going to present first, but I know it'll be awesome.
Yeah, it's funny when you say cult TV, your mind goes blank. And then once it's all over, you're like, why didn't I talk about this or this or this? And
We
start thinking about it. Yeah. So here's a favorite of mine. It's one I had heard people talking about. It's a British show. And when I say that, a British situation comedy, there was a joke in The Simpsons once where they said, and now Britain's most successful, longest running TV show, 18 years and 12 episodes. And that's about how it goes. The IT crowd, I believe they had what they call four seasons, for a grand total of 24 episodes and one special to kind of wrap it all up. So you can binge this in a very short period of time. Each episode's only about 25 minutes. So if you want to spend a weekend and have a great time, the IT crowd. It's often streaming somewhere. I don't know exactly where it would be now. And the premise is, I think of this as a much funnier, wittier version of like Big Bang Theory, with much more likable characters. And it's set.
I don't like those characters.
Yeah, it's set in some fictional British corporation run by a complete monster, imbecile guy who's just completely greedy and awful in every way, but not at all hypocritical. Wears it on his sleeve. And the IT group, that just these two guys, one of them kind of socially inept but brilliant, and the other just a regular guy who would rather not be working. Their job is mostly just to sit around, and when people call up with a problem, say, "Did you turn it off and turn it back on?" Pause, nod their head, go back to reading comic books or whatever it was they were doing. So pretty much real
like
life.
a real IT department.
Yeah. And they get Catherine Parkinson, the actress, plays character Jen, who becomes their manager, despite the fact that she knows nothing about IT. And in one of my favorite episodes, she's looking for another job, better job somewhere, and the interview is going absolutely fantastic. And then the interviewer asks her, "So I've been meaning to wonder, what does IT stand for?" and she gets this wonderful deer in the headlights looks because she doesn't have the vaguest idea of what the I or the T stands for. She tries to bullshit her way through it. What doesn't it stand for? It stands for caring and teamwork. And yes, but what does IT? And she doesn't know. At some point they convince her that the internet is in a small box, and she carries it around. This is the internet.
Oh,
So there's that and everything. But the characters are flawed but likable, even when they're really not, and it's brilliantly cast. I think that's really the difference between shows that work and shows that don't. You can't imagine anyone else being in the role.
yeah.
Especially Catherine Parkinson is great. The Chris Morris as Denham Rainholm, I guess I may be just because it's in English doesn't mean I can't mispronounce it. I'm good at that.
Like
He's
Denholm Elliott.
fantastic, and I don't want to give away, but at some point his son takes over the business, and his son is played by Matt Berry. And Matt Berry is great. He's terrific in everything he does. He plays a certain role really well. The character he plays in What We Do in the Shadows is terrific, and this character has some of that over the top elements. When he first shows up, he just bursts through the door of a church, and he like takes a few steps, and it's like, Father, and it's so Shakespearean and over the top. My youngest daughter and I, this is one of our rituals when I go visit her in Canada and I see her, she'll just come walking in, Father, and people stare at us. We don't care. He's terrific. He's and really when they lose the one character and go to another, a lot of times in shows, that's when things start falling apart. No, that he's terrific in it. It's just a great series, definitely worth watching. And every now and then there's some little weird surprises, like there's a room in the IT department that I guess a door that they've never bothered opening at some point. And when they do, they find out that there's an executive who years ago was banished to the IT department server room, and he's turned into this goth character. At first you think he's a ghost or a monster. It's Noel Fielding, who is now he's in the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, he's the host.
Yeah, one of the hosts.
Damn.
And he's fantastic. It is, like I said, it's a great show. Now, they have attempted, I believe, 3 times to make this into an American show. Because sometimes that works. Sometimes The Office made them a mint of money. But then again, you get Red Dwarf, where they have tried to make an American Red Dwarf, and it's been so horrible that they buried the pilot in the same grave they put the original Game of Thrones and Buffy. It seems like, they did a Doctor Who. They did an American Doctor Who too, and I think you can get a gray market copy of that somewhere. And it's god awful. There are some things that are just so damn British that they don't transfer well, or you have to do like what they did with Sanford and Son, and just take the premise, and that's it. Just bare bones premise, father and son. ...
To me, those are some of the best adaptations, really, or remakes. I mean,
well, yeah, it's almost like, did they even have to pay Steptoe and Son to do Sanford and Son? Because I've seen an episode. I watched Sanford and Son when it was originally on, and I've seen a few episodes. Steptoe and Son is like, if you didn't tell me that this was based on this, I would not have known. Like, I'm always amazed when people pay money for adaptations they don't have to. This is digress, but I've said everything about the IT crowd. I don't want to give too much away because it's worth watching. I would not steer you wrong. Trust me, you'll like it unless you have no sense of humor. But I was at a convention once, and Stan Lee was there talking about how Dino De Laurentiis came, and this is back when Marvel would sell their characters to anyone with 2 nickels to rub together, because nobody thought there was any money in superheroes at all. And Dino De Laurentiis came, and he spread Stan Lee put all the comic books that they were publishing that month on the table to see what he would pick. One of them was Ghost Rider. And I get that because it's a cool visual. I can see where some Dino De Laurentiis, skeleton, flaming skeleton on a motorcycle. It writes
pretty
itself.
iconic.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it was sea level Marvel at that time. it was not one of their big sellers, but I could see where someone who knows nothing about comics would think that's pretty cool on what we could do with that. Of course, this is back in the 70s when to film it, they would have had to like douse a guy with kerosene and set him on fire and film until he died. So it's just as well it did get me. I don't remember what the other one was. It was slightly more like, okay, I could sort of see you liking that. It was they didn't go for Spider-Man or Hulk or Captain America, or any of those. Maybe those weren't available. But the other one that he had to buy from them was Werewolf by Night.
Mm.
And Stan Lee, in his telling of the story, was like, you know me, I'll do anything to make a buck. You're like, we know, Stan, we know. Goes, but even I felt bad. And I said to him, listen, we really don't own the rights to a werewolf. I mean, it's a book about a guy who turns into a werewolf.
Yeah.
We do not own the rights to this. You can even use the word werewolf and night and probably buy, but you just can't. As long as you don't call it Werewolf by Night, call it anything else.
Yeah, it can't be trademarked.
Yeah, but that's what he wanted. Like, okay.
I'm glad when
Anyway.
they finally did it though that it was comic.
Oh, it was
accurate,
great.
which
It was
was
great.
weird because
No,
they had kind
one
of
of the
written it off
luckiest-
because of that story.
One of the luckiest breaks we've had is that the superhero genre didn't take off until the technology was able to actually make it work.
Mhm.
Because I know James Cameron was going to do Spider-Man. I've
Mhm.
read the script and it's pretty awful.
Yep.
Yeah, I
And
haven't
the special effects back then would have been pretty awful. And it would have been produced by Canon Films, which would have guaranteed it was really awful. So that would
Yeah,
have
I mean,
buried everything. There's
unless
no
they-
chance it would have succeeded.
Well, I'm
So,
glad it did.
The IT crowd, seek it out, look it up. Good stuff. Good
sounds
stuff.
fabulous. Oh God,
Yes.
knocked my headphone out. I'm getting a microphone soon. I have it actually. Okay, so listen, that was great, Bill. And just real quick, I want to say like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. We're gradually getting to a plateau or a landmark, but we need to get there, as soon as possible. Trying to hit 500, and we're at 460. So, if
It's
you
so
like-
easy. You just click a button you like, you subscribe, and
Yes, it just
it
takes
does
a
mean
minute.
something.
And it'll actually, the more you do it, the more you'll get used to using YouTube, and the more it'll help us, and I know you guys will help us. So I'm going to move on to Mr. Keith Howell. And what is your pick, sir?
Okay.
What could it be?
Cult TV. I have picked Swamp Thing, which has had life before on television now a couple of times. Swamp Thing is an interesting property. We were talking before the show a little bit about the comic book background on Swamp Thing. Well, in brief, early 70s, Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson's classic character, the guy who turns into a Swamp Thing, right? And then over the course of the next 10 issues or so that they did together, hit a different monster every issue. And it was very gothic, it was very moody, it was very cool. It was the cool book, right?
Yep.
And burned themselves out on it very quickly, even at being a bi-monthly book. DC could never seem to replicate that, the success of that. And it trudged along for a little while, but eventually just kind of imploded with the rest of DC around the mid-70s. Character bounced around, and then it kind of came back around 81. They brought him back because they had made a sweetheart deal with Michael Uslan to make a movie with director Wes Craven. And they basically gave him all the rights to Swamp Thing, and all they hold on to was the publishing rights. So of course they tried to cash in, and they're expecting big money off of this thing. So decided we got to get a Swamp Thing comic book out. So they got one out there. It was Marty Pasco, writer. Tom Yates did the art.
Great
It was
art.
actually really good.
Great
It was
art.
a really good comic. Didn't sell. I was literally the only person in my town of Temple, Texas, that was buying or having the comic guy there, the one comic shop we had, order Swamp Thing. I was the only guy.
Wow.
He said I have to order 2 copies for Lone Star Comics to do it, to allow me to order it. So he said I got this extra copy that just always sits on the shelf because of you, Keith. But nobody was buying Swamp Thing, but me. And and then of course Pasco decided to move on, and Len Wein brought in Alan Moore, who was an up and coming writer at that point in England, and he just, he and artist Steve Bissette just completely turned Swamp Thing, and John Tottleman turned Swamp Thing on its ear and turned it into a phenomenon. Even though that didn't happen for a while, even after that, even that first year or so of Alan Moore's run, still I was the only guy buying it.
It wasn't very it was very
Yeah.
underappreciated.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
what knocked me out is when I saw issue 17, Pasco was still writing it, but that was the first issue with Bissett and Tottleman. And I was looking at it at the stand, and I was like, this is the most incredible line art I've seen
Well,
in comic book. And I bought it, and that was it. I got every.
And I've gotten to listen to a lot of stuff with Steve Bissette, who's worth listening to. He does a lot of commentaries on DVDs now in his retirement, but he also has done a lot of interviews and lectures about Swamp Thing. I'll just let you know, he and John Tottleman were involved with Swamp Thing basically from the beginning of that run with Tom Yeats, they were classmates together in the Joe Kubert school. And so they were all helping out with each other. It's like they'd be there in one room together. Yeats would be passing over a page to one of them to finish up some inks on something or to sketch something out. So their hands were involved in that even earlier than they got credit for. And so it built. It was one of those things that was a nice organic build of popularity. And eventually, it led to the creation of Vertigo Publishing and a whole new realm of DC Comics because of that one comic. So anyway, so after that success, once that became a phenomenon in the comics, then they tried to cash in with Return of the Swamp Thing, which was arguably, on one hand, much worse than the Wes Craven movie, which was terrible, but yet had a charm. But arguably also much better than the Wes. It's a weird. If you've never seen Return of the Swamp Thing, it's a weird thing because
I have never seen it all the way through, to be honest.
Visually, if you see the remasters where it's nice and clear, it's visually really kind of cool. In what it was doing, but it's got this wacky approach to it. It really embraces the comic bookness, completely missing the point and the tone of the Alan Moore comics, but taking elements of it and doing this campy thing. And there's almost a Mystery Science Theater-esque charm to that. So I kind of love both of them myself. And at the time, even when I was just in my early teens, I dug it. Even seeing the low budget and the zippers on the suits and stuff like that, I still dug it. But then that led to again Uslan trying to make some more money. He got the USA Network to back a TV series that ran for a number of years, Swamp Thing, which is probably less well known even than what I'm about to talk about. And only because it's recent. No, this was live action. And
I forgot that.
And Dick Durock from the movies was there as Swamp Thing, and they hired a younger British actor, Mark. Ah, dang it! What's the name of the guy that shot John Lennon? David Chapman.
David Chapman.
This guy's name was Mark Chapman, and unfortunately, and that's how I remember the association. Anyway, younger guy playing Arcade. And it was just a cheap episodic thing, but it went for a number of years, at least 4 years. I'd have to go look it back up. and it's a completely forgettable thing, but it exists. It's out there, but I don't know. Most people have forgotten that it exists. It's a
If
forgotten
I
show.
forgot it, I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, so that's another topic for another cult TV one, is maybe to talk about that one. But I want to talk about then 2019 Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
So all of that was just to get you to 2019, when this is pre HBO Max, and DC started the DC Universe app. And the DC Universe app you could subscribe to, and they would have all the DC movies and cartoons and TV shows were all in one place. You could read comic books on it. You could, and you had original cartoons on there. You had original live action TV series that were on there, including the Titans and Doom Patrol.
I love
All
those shows.
all started out on the DC Universe app before HBO Max came along and shut
Yeah.
it down and
Can you-
absorbed everything out of there. Mhm.
Can you tell the geeks in the
Mm.
audience, if they don't already know, what distinguished the DC Universe one? I mean, it was a response to the hard R Netflix Marvel, but they went even harder, a lot more like gorier, a lot more explicit language, more sex.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
That was unique, at the time.
It was almost like the DC was doing the Vertigo app, not the DC Universe app,
right.
because that's
Doom
what
Patrol.
yeah. I mean, their Doom Patrol, Swamp Thing, these were all coming through the Vertigo, and they took the Titans, the Teen Titans, and filtered it through that same net. And it was. I think the first trailer for that they dropped at like San Diego Comic-Con or something, and had that sequence where Nightwing beats somebody up, or Robin. He was dressed as Robin then.
Yeah.
It was beat some thugs up, and they make some comment about Batman. And he looks at him and goes, "Fuck Batman!"
Yeah.
Right? And everybody,
The fan
of
bros
course,
had an aneurysm.
Yeah, it just broke the internet. And it's like, but no, this Titan show
That was
is
funny.
odd. It's an odd
It is
thing,
odd.
but it has a charm. The actors are really good. It has some visual accuracy to the comics, even though the tone is very different than the comic book. But so
The
worth
plots
watching.
are very much and Perez.
Yep, I'm very happy with it, and I was very happy where they went with it when they got to HBO. But Swamp Thing itself, it's a weird behind the scenes thing with that. So because it got an order for 13 episodes, and the first episode dropped on the streamer while they were still filming, and they canceled the show the week after the first episode dropped, and that meant they didn't get the last 3 episodes. So it ends with 10 episodes. So this is gonna be I think a real good example of cult TV, because this is going to be hard for people to even know that it exists, and maybe hard for them to find if they don't know it exists. But
of course, I watched it every week, first run.
But I own it on digital.
Okay.
because I'm
Yeah,
afraid
I
I was afraid it was going to disappear, so I bought it.
Oh, yeah.
But it is buried, I think, on Max right now. But at any time they may just decide to take it off of there. But it has a pedigree, because Mark Verheiden was the one who came in to write the show, and James Wan was brought in to executive produce the show. And we don't know what happened. Nobody's ever really talked about what happened that caused this thing to shut down just like that and just send the actors home. It's like they showed up and they sent them all home. And production was just done. We got everybody signed on for this show. So I mean, we sort of get a conclusion of sorts, but it's one of those to be continued kind of things where you're expecting more to happen. Well, obviously there was more that was
they
going
set
to
up
happen.
with so much stuff.
Yeah. There was a lot that was being set up, and there was obviously an idea and a plan to go longer. And it's disappointing that we didn't get that, because there's a lot of that stuff was really intriguing. And I'll give you a little bit of kind of a background here on the casting, and then some of the characters that they brought into this universe they were building. This sort of a dark universe in the DC universe. But they brought in some good actors. The ones you might know mostly would be like Jennifer Beals came in to play Matt Cable's mother. And on the show, she was the sheriff of this town. They set it all in this small Louisiana town, which is, smart, keep it local, not have swampy, like moving all around and having to figure out new locations. So you figure out ways to keep it
They have to
in
stay
this
in the
one
swamp.
locality. Yeah, you got to have this one little area. So they figured out a way, a little place and created that. So yes. So Matt Cable, who fans of the comic book would recognize the name. Matt in the comics was like an FBI agent who came in. Well, here he's a local guy whose mom was the sheriff, and so Jennifer Beals plays that part. Then Virginia Madsen plays Maria Sunderland, who's married to Avery Sunderland, played by the great Will Patton, who I just love and everything. He's also my favorite Stephen King audiobook reader. But anyway, Will Patton plays Avery Sunderland, who readers of the comic would recognize, and the character is pretty accurate to the comic book from my memory.
Yeah, equally loathsome.
Yeah, he's a terrible person. And they hired Kevin Durand, again, great voice actor, but also you recognize him from all kinds of things on screen too. But you hear him a lot. He's in a lot of animated shows as well. He came on to play Jason Woodrue, who's going to become the Floronic Man, right? And we had Andy Bean, who I don't know, who came on as Alec Holland, and Derek Mears, who plays him after he turns to Swamp Thing.
Derek Mears was the guy who played he played the skinhead thug in Twin Peaks that Mr. Steve beats to death, even though he's like half his size.
Okay.
That's the first, and he was a stuntman too. That's all I know about him.
Well, that follows the tradition of Swamp Thing being played by a stuntman, because Dick Durock, same thing, is a stuntman actor. But some of the other characters that they brought in, they did have Abby Arcane. Yes. They didn't introduce her uncle Anton Arcane, which I'm sure was probably going to be that 13th episode, was probably going to introduce at that point. But she was played by Crystal Reed. They introduced some other DC characters I want to mention. There was Madame Xanadu was brought in.
Yeah.
And they also had a regular, these were recurring or regular characters. They had the character of Dan Cassidy, or the Blue Devil.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is another example of taking a character and putting him into this darker, more serious environment. Because anybody who knows the Blue Devil from the DC comics knows it was a very lighthearted comic book. He was a stuntman who, through supernatural shenanigans, he's the stuntman who's playing this character, the Blue Devil, and supernatural shenanigans, that costume becomes him, and he's stuck looking like the Blue Devil with big horns and all this kind of costume and his trident and all that, and he just can't change out of it. It's just him now. He's the Blue Devil, and he's stuck that way. Well, it was a very lighthearted comic book, and it was fun, and it was kind of a throwback to those days. Well, in this, he's not so fun. He's a stuntman, and he's tortured by having been cursed. He cannot leave the city limits, and all he wants to do is leave the city limits here, and he's stuck with this Blue Devil costume. And they set him on the course for turning into the Blue Devil. We didn't get the follow through by the end. I think
got some of the powers.
Yeah, it got I think those last 3 episodes, that was going to be one of the things, but he got almost there. He started to burn with the blue flame and stuff like that. And we saw the costume in a box a couple of times. So we actually saw the face. It looked just like the comic book. We saw him in the suit, because we had a flashback to him on set as the stuntman playing Blue Devil, and it was comic book accurate. It looked great on him. It didn't look like cosplay. It did actually look like, the costume, like it should. The character of the Phantom Stranger appeared in
an interesting translation.
Yeah, and they reworked, just like they reworked Dan Cassidy, have him more serious and tortured. They reworked Phantom Stranger. He winds up being the one who kind of is the supernatural mentor in a way for Dan Cassidy.
Yeah.
He's there like at the point where the curse happens, like maybe even is the one who put it on him.
Does
That
he
kind of
occur?
thing.
Does he appear to Swamp Thing? I can't remember. Don't they meet once?
There is an interaction, I think, with Swamp Thing, and there's some differences because he appears a little different each time. He doesn't look like the comic book character.
No, they made him more
Um,
modern, younger.
yeah, but they made him a little sloppier.
He's kind of a
Uh,
hipster look because that
yeah,
actor looks
Mm.
like that. Is it
yeah.
making Blair?
You know,
Believe?
in the comic books, you know, he's very dapper dressed.
Mhm.
His face is always in shadow. You only see his eyes. His hat is, you know, there and it's always shadowed. And he's got like a white turtleneck and he's got the amulet and he's got a cape and all that. Well, in this, our first introduction to him, Phantom Stranger appears in the swamp, kind of just coming through on a little boat, and he's got a rather floppy hat, you know, not a fancy hat, but a floppy hat, and he's a little grungy, and the amulets doesn't look quite so nice, and he's got a grungy beard. His face isn't in shadow, you know, and it's like he's kind of the mystery man, wisdom who kind of pops in and out. And you know, and then the flashback, he was a little bit better. His hair's pulled back, he's clean shaven. You know, it's like he makes himself a little bit different. He's a little heavier, he's not as tall or, you know, and as dapper as the comic book version, but it's an interesting take on Phantom Stranger that he
Yeah,
might take on some different looks and stuff like that. It works for TV
which
like
makes
that.
sense how
Yeah,
powerful he is.
yeah. And so that the show, you know, it benefits if you're a DC fan, which I am. Then you know, it was a really cool imagining on all of this
It was
little
fun.
dark universe within
Yeah.
there. That really, it is unfortunate that we didn't get the final resolution and that we did not get more of it, but it is worth watching. You get enough of a resolution. They did at least let us get to the anatomy lesson, which is important for
Yeah, it is.
anybody who's watching Swamp Thing. It's also very horrific. The graph,
That's pretty good.
they really dive deep into, and I guess it's the James Wan influence a lot. There's body horror very strong in this one. If that bothers someone, they probably don't want to watch it, but you know, they fully embrace the horror aspect of it, so it's almost like a horror soap opera,
Yeah.
because a lot of the character interactions are very soap opera-y, with a lot more foul language and a lot more death and murder and supernatural killing and stuff like that. And the Swamp Thing is very well done. He looks just like he walked off the page of an Alan Moore, Stephen Bissett, John Totleben comic
Yeah.
book. They
I
go
like the way
in.
they did his. Yeah.
Yeah, they did all this, and his eyes, they did obviously did like a little post thing, so his eyes are a little glowing red in every scene. And you know, the acting, Derek Mears does a very good job under all of that. And they build us towards the penultimate episode, which is where they do their anatomy lesson episode, where the previous 8 episodes we're all supposed to be tracking along with him being Alec Holland, who's turned into a swamp monster. And, you know, in that 9th episode, we get the anatomy lesson and find out he's not Alec Holland. He never was Alec Holland. He is, you know, a part of the green. He is a plant who has, because of the circumstances and what happened, thinks he's Alec Holland. So he has a whole identity issue,
Yeah, it's
you
pretty
know, that
tragic.
comes up. And you know, and he's been developing a relationship with Abby during those 8 episodes, so it's a bit of a trauma. And then we lead into the, you know, the final episode, and there's like a dramatic con uh conflict between he and Jason Woodrue. So if you're DC fan, check it out. If you're a horror fan, check it out. I it, like I said, it's, I know it's on Max. It had a limited rerun, I guess you'd call it, on CW a couple years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
where they took it, but then they had to have edited it. I didn't go back and watch it because I didn't want to.
No.
I didn't want to see what they did to it, because they would have to have edited some of the gore. They would have had to have edited some of the language.
Yeah. For some reason
And
they went. For some reason they went more family friendly, relatively speaking, than they did with the Titans and Doom Patrol, which you think it would be kind of the other way around with the Titans would be the
Yeah.
one they do it. But go figure, you know.
Yeah.
There is an Easter egg that I didn't even really notice because of the casting is so unusual, and not necessarily in a bad way, but sometimes unrecognizable until you get into the character. Her best friend in the show is Liz Tremaine. Now that is a Mari Pascoe character that Alan
Yeah.
Moore turned into a traumatized woman on the run.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here she's African American girlfriend of Abby's, and I
Right.
like
And
that.
and they built up a, a relationship with her father and
Yeah.
with Avery that, is interesting. And Adrian Barbeau did pop in for a little cameo as another character too, which was a nice nod back to the movies. I guess maybe if we'd gotten into a second season, maybe Heather Locklear would have popped in. I don't know.
Oh God. Well, Adrian Barbeau really has hard cred after Carnival,
Yeah.
so I like Emily Thomas though, but Locklear or whatever.
But yeah, I mean, I would have really liked to have seen much more of it. But anyway,
So you're making me want to see it so bad.
yeah, don't go looking for it if they've. I don't know if they've still got it, but if they've still got it on the CW app, yeah, skip that. Go to to Max.
The Blu-ray is in my Amazon card. It has been for
there you go.
2 years. I just had.
I was able to find like the
man.
by just doing a search on UV Spider, I was able to find like the digital season for something like $3 and own it. So it's like you can get it digital
download
pretty cheap,
okay.
I think, unless they're all sold out of them.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did a great job.
Hi, this is Henry Covert, and this has been Deep Images. Hope you enjoyed today's segment, and we will be back soon to continue our discussion on Cult TV. Feel free to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the ending credits and the beautiful music of Ghost of Day, and thank you for watching.